There is no news about Poland. There's no news about Poland. There is no news about Poland. That's what I thought when I first came to Poland over 13 years ago. And that was true, but it's not true anymore because of the leading English language website about Poland, thefirstnews.com. And I'm joined today by Dagmara Leszkowicz, who is the editor-in-chief of thefirstnews.com. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Patty. Thanks for having me here.
I've kind of been waiting for this interview for quite some time. We talked about it for a while because this is the 125th episode of Heart of Poland. And I should probably declare an interest as well that you are actually, technically speaking, my boss. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct.
But I promise to treat you with no favor whatsoever. And this will be a great interview, I'm sure, because you have an amazing story to tell, an amazing story about an amazing country, the country of Poland. Can you just tell us, therefore, what is the First News all about?
The First News is about telling the world about how Poland is great. I mean, well, maybe let me start with a little anecdote. When we first launched the First News, it was 2018, and when we were looking about something that would be about Poland and the historical policy of Poland, we couldn't find anything. So we thought, well, that's our niche. That's what we should start. And we did start, but what I told my boss, who is a boss also of a Polish press agency, is that I don't want like this to look like, no weeping willows, storks, and folk groups. Of course, it is important, but this is something that the previous, media companies focus on. We wanted to show how Poland is an interesting country, that Poland is a country of very interesting people, and Poland is a country of full engaging stories, and also full of interesting people.
Yeah. And what I find, and I'm going to have to be very careful to start not congratulating Dagmara for what an excellent job she's done, but I will say this, which is what I think differentiates thefirstnews.com from many other sites, there's not that many, is the fact they have an actual team of journalists. You have an actual team of journalists.
True.
Was that important from the start? And who are these madcap journalists writing about this crazy country, Poland?
True. And this is actually something that I'm very, very proud of, believe me, because, finding experienced journalists right now, especially in a country of Poland that speaks English very well, is not an easy thing. And we've managed over the last 5 years, so, just at the beginning, to keep those journalists. So we have like a bunch of very good journalists. It's a very good team. Oh, well, I'm just blowing my own trumpet. I mean, but that's
well, when
true.
your trumpet is this beautiful, boss, why not blow it yourself? Yeah.
But that's true, and they're really experienced. And actually, I'm really proud of what they're doing, because this is a group of people who are just writing very good stories, unbiased stories, and very engaging ones.
Well, let's talk about some of those stories then. So obviously over the last 5 years, there have been lots of stories.
Yes.
Poland's involvement, for example, with Ukraine, where Poland has become, really a big geopolitical player, I would say right now, has been a particular high point. What are some of the most standout stories for you? And it doesn't have to be the ones that are most read. Maybe it's the ones that you most emotionally connected with.
Well, honestly, I'm mostly connected emotionally with a story that I've written myself, because I don't really have time right now to write stories. But I did have a couple of tasks and topics that I wanted really to focus on. And actually, I've just written like 3 stories for the First News. They were actually quite popular. But let me get back to like a top stories, because, it's funny with the First News, because it's not only about politics. Actually, it's just the least about politics. The First News is mostly about history, art, culture, and when it comes to politics, like a real-time news, we do have that, but it's just like a sort of like a margin. And the top 3 stories, just, well, how to say that, they're not really coherent, because, for example, number 1 is about Wołyń, which is like, a very hot topic, but number 2 story is about the little village in Poland, southeastern Poland, that a mayor promised a couple to pay a price when the couple will have a boy, because just only girls are born there.
Yeah.
And this was one of the most read stories on the first news.
And this is story interests me. I'm like, why are so many people interested in this? They want to
Well,
go to the village to maybe meet a
yeah,
Polish
that's
wife and have a boy or something. Maybe we need some injection of some new genes out there. I think in the end, I believe a year later there was a boy born in that village.
yes, and that was big news.
Yeah.
It was we did a follow up on that. And, because we interviewed a lady who gave birth to a baby boy. She was very proud of it, and Mayor kept his promise, and she was rewarded.
How much do you get for having a boy now? I'd have to find out or go and check on thefirstnews.com. Okay, so you mentioned the tragic story of Wołyń.
Yes.
Popular from the point of view of reading. You mentioned this crazy story where there's no boy born, although there was in the end. Congratulations. What was the third story that you mentioned?
Well, the third story is also quite sad because this is a story about the concentration camp in Łódź for children. And well, the Łódź is like in general like a subject of interest, especially foreigners, because it's a town that it's not really explored. But the story is also wasn't really popular beforehand. But it started to be popular. Well, I think like when a couple of years ago, someone written a book about that, and we did a story about that, and it's very sad actually.
Where's the balance between too much about the past and then stories like this where people go, what? There was a concentration camp for children? I'd never heard about that. I personally felt like I'd heard just about every story about the Holocaust and German occupation of Europe that could exist. And then you find out that something as horrific as a concentration camp for children came around. So how do you find the balance between those two positions?
Well, it's just it's a teamwork. It's a teamwork, but because when you're asking about the balance, because I presume that your question is about the balance of stories.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, because you'll have some people who say, oh, Polish people, they're stuck in the past. They're always going on about World War II. No one cares. I hate to say that, but that's what I've heard. And then you have other people who say, hang on, this is a story that the world should hear because there's something very chilling about this. And I certainly, when I remember reading that story, going, I'd never heard about this. And I really have spent a lot of time reading about Poland.
Well, there's like a razor thin line of, you need to find this balance because sometimes we have like a bunch of story ideas and they're mostly about history. So what we do is we try to like spread it, like, over the weeks, not to overwhelm our readers. But, it's just, it's Poland, the every single street, every single town has like tons, like hundreds of historical pieces that could be easily picked up and described. So it's just, it's very difficult actually, but that's why we're having experienced journalists.
Yeah, exactly. To be able to be told with respect as well. There's the story of the midwife of Auschwitz, for example, which when I read that story on the firstnews.com was really just so horrific.
Which I did.
Yeah, indeed you did. And,
Thank you.
I know that.
Thank you.
But it is genuinely, it's a story you read that and go, oh my God, I thought I'd heard everything again. And yet here's another story coming to light thanks to the website.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, the story about the midwife from Auschwitz is like very close to my heart because this is a story when my literature experiences started. Honestly, because once upon a time, like it was a couple of years ago, I was just sitting and looking for stories because it was a time when I was more involved in finding stories. Right now, I have like a very good deputy editor, and he's more into it because I have also other duties. But I was looking for a story, and then I found out that apparently a person who was just, was popping up here and there, the Stanisława Leszczyńska, midwife from Auschwitz, but she wasn't really very popular, so to speak. And I found out somewhere that actually this person, she's a relative of a wife of our football superstar, Anna Lewandowska. So I thought, oh my God, this is a story for the first news. Here you have like Anna Lewandowska and you have like a midwife of Auschwitz. So I tried to get in touch with Anna's mother, who was starting to make a film about midwife of Auschwitz, and she agreed to give me an interview. And then after like a week or so, she asked me to help out in writing a book, a biography about midwife of Auschwitz. And that's how it all started.
Which is kind of freaky coincidence, right? All of these
It
things coming
was.
together.
It was.
You are an accomplished author, and we're going to come on to that, but I'll circle around back again. So I'm interested, are there any kind of fun stories about Poland that maybe you'd like to mention now?
Well, fun stories, I mean, just plenty of them. It's just not only about like Poland as such, but also about like animals that live here. I remember, it was a sort of like a, leitmotif or something that we keep repeating all the time when we're talking about funny stories. It's just that we have like a bunch of very serious historical pieces. And then in the middle of like on the main page, we have like a story about a hairy dog that hasn't been cut, and it looked like a sort of like a Bob Marley of all dogs. So like a hairy dog is just a funny story. It's not typically about Poland, but it's like the dog was owned by a Pole. Yeah, so this is
Well,
something that comes to my mind.
I'm surprised you didn't mention the croissant monster in the tree, because that was actually like an international news story. The first news.com was one of the
I
pages
remember that story.
ran
It
it.
just reminded me that story. I forgot about
The
that.
lady who rang up saying there's a
Yeah.
monster in the tree
Yes.
opposite my
Yes.
window, and I'm not sure if the police were called. I can't quite remember the ending, but it turns out upon closer inspection that it was actually a croissant that had somehow landed in the tree, which, frankly speaking, is a story in of itself, because who finds a croissant in a
Well,
tree?
you did that. You did that in our videos, right? It was quite popular. It was actually super popular.
So 'cause I feel like there's some weird and wacky things happening in Poland. Maybe Poland doesn't get the reputation for being a weird and wacky place, but or maybe it does. But
Maybe it
there's
does.
surprisingly large number of stories like that about the man who falls over on a bike and finds a hoard of coins in the moss. Those
That
kind of
was
stories.
actually one of like the most popular stories on the first news as well. That he found that. He was, yeah. This is exactly what happened.
So, Dagmar, I must confess that for a couple of weeks afterwards, I would practice falling off my bike and just in hoping that, is there going to be a kind of Viking coin hoard here? And I only found a couple of old bottle tops and plastic wrappers.
So that's
Okay,
the
so
plan.
I had this impression, and I've been talking to a lot of guests about it on Heart of Poland, the premier English language video interview platform for Poland, hosted on thefirstnews.com, that Poland has some really bad PR. And that we're kind of fighting against that a little bit. And I feel like Poland's best ambassadors are its people. Do you think Poland has as bad PR as I think it does? Or are we actually do we have a better reputation than we give ourselves credit for?
Well, it does, unfortunately, because we haven't done anything with this, like, since the end of the Second World War, under communism, it was kind of obvious we couldn't do anything with this. But even over the last 30 years, nothing or not many things has been done to improve that, to change that. And actually, the first news was just like a maybe tiny little thing, but it was something that was supposed to change that. When we've launched that, I mean, this is exactly what we thought. That was our aim, our goal, right? To change the way people think about Poland.
Yeah.
That, as I'm saying, it's not only the country of folk groups and weeping willows and storks. It's a country of energetic people having great ideas and about great history that actually not many people, know. But, it's kind of obvious.
This makes me think of some of the technologies that have been written about on thefirstnews.com. You've got
Yeah.
really incredible scientists, and then the
Exactly.
tech and scientist community coming together, entrepreneurs, production. And now that's not headline news stuff. And yet some of the technologies that we've been writing about are ones that are literally going to change the world, and already are in many cases as well. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your personal view of Poland. So I'm going to do my quick fire round, Dagmar, and this is very free and very fair because I do this to most people who come. Favorite place in Poland?
Warsaw.
Correct answer. Favorite Polish food?
Pierogi.
Which kind of pierogi?
Ruskie. Oh, maybe let's repeat it. It's not Ruskie. It's like it's Polish. It's Ukrainian.
Ukrainskie, I think it's been
It's-
rebranded. let's
Yes.
say. Okay, that's also a very, very correct answer. And if you disagree with Dagmara on your pierogi filling, you need to let us know in the comments. I do like a bit of meat, but we'll come back to that. We'll circle around to that one as well. Okay, where would you recommend for a person coming to Poland to go to first? Doesn't have to be your favorite city.
Wrocław.
Because?
Because it's beautiful. You know, the way, I mean, I used to live, well, maybe not near Wrocław because it was between Wrocław and Poznań. And I remember that town from 80s, from like a, you know, mid 80s. It was a really very interesting town. But then when I returned after like 20 years, I was just like, I was just, you know, stunned. I was just, it's absolutely beautiful.
It really is. And it's like what Krakow could be if it didn't have 10 million tourists a year
Exactly.
coming to it. No offense to Krakow. Okay. Favorite Polish word?
Taczka.
What does that mean? I can't
The,
remember.
the carrier,
Oh,
the
tray?
yeah, tray.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
Taczka.
Okay, if you had to be locked in a prison for crimes against journalism, which would obviously never happen, who would you want to be in the cell with? It can be any Pole, living or dead. We had a very interesting answer in a guest recently.
Stanisław Lem.
Really? Two authors just sitting there doing collabs and book writing. To my shame, I haven't read any Stanisław Lem, but I've been told that in Polish, at least, he's a brilliant author, author of Solaris.
He was a prophet. He was a prophet. I mean, just, you know, all the things he invented and he written in his books actually are taking place right now. That's amazing, really. And he believed in science.
Can you sum Poland up in one word?
Beautiful.
Why?
Because it's my country.
What makes it beautiful?
People, surroundings, everything, literally everything. It's just because it's an absolutely beautiful country.
Could you imagine yourself living anywhere else?
Well, yes, but I will still have Poland in my heart.
That's what I think is most amazing about Poland, because I mean, I'm British. I came here 13 years ago. I think I'm probably on record as being quite a pro-Poland fan. It's possible to become Polish. And when I go back to the UK, I often think to myself, yeah, I could move back here, but a large part of me would always really miss Poland. And yet it's quite hard for me to put my finger on exactly what it is I'd be missing, you know? It's like a state of mind. Okay, let's talk. So you're a very experienced journalist, worked at a number of different publications in senior roles, and you started going into writing, book writing. How you find the time for all of this, I'm not entirely sure, but you're obviously a master of compartmentalization and work, and you've written a number of very acclaimed books as well. Can you just talk about some of the other projects that you've worked on too, because I think they're very interesting.
Right now, I'm working on a project. I mean, by project, I guess that you mean a book, right? I'm about to finish, I mean, at least I hope I'm about to finish, a book which, well, actually, which is where, like, my mind, like, for years. It's a sort of like a very sad story about, like, a love triangle between a woman and a guy who worked for, like, a secret service, like a communist secret service. It was called UB, and the cursed soldier. So, like, three people. And by telling this story, which is very sad, I'm telling a story about Poland after the Second World War. Because not many people know, but after the Second World War, we did have a sort of like a civil war. And it lasted till 1952. And it is actually a very sad story. And actually, even though I was, you know, taught a history in a free Poland, I wasn't even aware of the fact that, you know, such things, you know, happened that time. And actually, because of a great job of the Institute of National Remembrance, we do know that because they reveal that, like with lots of books and publications about that. So that's the story that I'm, you know, just focused on right now. And believe me, it's very difficult to write that story. I mean, to write that novel, not only because of the emotional burden, but also all those little bits and pieces of, you know, because I want to be like 100% correct in that book. So this is a little bit difficult, but I hope I'll succeed.
As someone who's now written multiple books, you mentioned The Midwife of Auschwitz, you collaborated on it, supposed to be.
Well, more collaborated on that.
And you've written another fiction books based on your actual family story as well. As someone, therefore, who's looked quite a lot into Poland's traumatic past, what do you think the lessons of Poland's past should be for today's Poles?
We do not learn from a history. We do not. And I think we should start learning from our history because history is a very good teacher. And Poles do not think rationally, they think more emotionally. And this is a lesson from our history. We should start being more balanced between the two.
Oh, That would be a major tectonic shift for the people of Poland, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this only serves to underline about what a remarkable country Poland is, what a remarkable story it's had, and what a remarkable story it's having. And because of the work of my boss, Dagmara, and her team of amazing journalists, we have thefirstnews.com, which really is the best place to find out about what's happening in real time in English about Poland. It's been my tremendous pleasure to have over 125 episodes of Heart of Poland, as well as I think 400 episodes plus of What's Up Poland, a little bit more light-hearted story about Poland. And I'd like to thank you very much, Dagmara, for several years now of cooperation in telling Poland's story. We've had tens of millions of views now all around the world, and people writing saying, hey, I don't really know where this country is on a map, but I want to find out more. So thank you very much, Dagmara. I'm going to give you one last opportunity, this time to speak to the camera and to say something, anything that comes to your mind spontaneously to the people of Poland, to the viewers who watch our show.
Okay. If you see us, please visit Poland, because you'll be surprised how great country it is.
Yep. I think that's probably the one thing people say. You know, it's like if you have a low bar of expectation, then when people come and they see how freaking awesome it is, they go, "Oh, this is really, really nice."
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And just let me tell you just a very little anecdote, just to the end. When I first visited the UK, it was like, I think it was a turn of 80s and 90s. I was just standing like in a long line of like immigration officer. I was just so sad, blah blah blah. And we finally entered London. I was just, I was absolutely, amazed by what was going on there, by streets and shops and stuff. But right now, I travel quite a lot. And whenever I come back here, I'm surprised and stunned by what I see here.
yeah, it really is. Things are happening in this country. They're happening faster and faster.
Yes.
You know, we didn't really touch on geopolitics, but Poland's becoming a major player and,
Yeah.
you know, is respected as such by the US, for example. So these are interesting times that we live in. I would agree. You know, you come back and you see Warsaw's skyline, for example, has changed. Seems like there's another 3 skyscrapers that weren't there last week.
And look at how clean it is. Warsaw is a very clean country. I'm sorry, town. It's clean. It's just full of, it's green, lots of good restaurants, bars. It's energetic. It got its vibe.
It has got its vibe, as we do at thefirstnews.com and indeed Heart of Poland. So if you've enjoyed this special episode, and it really is a special episode, it's the 125th episode of Heart of Poland, then I'd like to invite you to do something really special too, which is to go back and see our back catalogue of episodes from Heart of Poland. We have had some amazing, in-depth, interesting, funny, and sometimes challenging discussions with authors, historians, sports players, beekeepers, plane skydivers, you name it. We talk to people about Poland leading fascinating lives in the fascinating country of Poland. So what I'd like to ask you to do now is to share this episode with anyone you think might be interested in Dagmara's story, everything she said today, and of course to go back and watch Heart of Poland wherever you can find it. And lastly, but not leastly, to visit thefirstnews.com. So I'll see you again for another episode of Heart of Poland.